The crystal towers of Vextara reached high into the purple sky, their surfaces catching the light of 3 distant suns. Inside the largest tower, beings from across the galaxy gathered in the great meeting hall. The air hummed with different languages and the soft glow of translation devices. This was the Galactic Council, the most powerful organization in known space. Admiral Kinos stood at the center of the circular room. His tall, thin body was covered in scales that shifted from blue to silver as he moved. His forearms gestured dramatically as he spoke to the assembled representatives. Behind him, a massive hologram showed a small yellow star with several planets orbiting around it. "Honored members of the Council," Kinos said, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "We face a problem that threatens our very authority. A species from this insignificant system has rejected our offer of membership. They call themselves humans." Murmurs of surprise and anger rippled through the crowd. In the 3,000 years since the Council was formed, no species had ever refused their invitation to join. It was unthinkable. The Council brought peace, order, and advanced technology to primitive worlds. Who would be foolish enough to say no? Commander Nithara rose from her seat near the front. Her crystalline body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns on the wall. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "What do we know about these humans?" she asked. The hologram changed to show images of human cities, ships, and people. The council members looked at the pictures with growing amusement. Some even laughed out loud. "They are mammals," Kinos said with obvious disgust. "They breathe oxygen and drink water. They have only 2 arms and 2 legs. Their average lifespan is less than 100 years. They have been traveling in space for less than 300 of their years." More laughter filled the hall. 300 years was nothing. Some of the council members were older than that. "Their technology is primitive beyond belief," Kinos continued. "They still use chemical rockets to move between planets. Their fastest ships take months to travel from one world to another in their own system. They have no energy shields, no matter transporters, no gravity control. They split atoms for power and think it makes them advanced." The laughter grew louder. Splitting atoms was something the Council had stopped doing tens of thousands of years ago. It was dangerous and inefficient compared to their antimatter reactors and zero-point energy collectors. "But surely they have weapons," said General Zixara, a massive creature that looked like a walking mountain. "Even the most primitive species has some way to fight." Kinos touched a control, and the hologram showed human warships. The council members fell silent, then erupted in even louder laughter than before. "These are their largest battle vessels," Kinos said, trying to keep the amusement out of his voice. "They call them battleships. The biggest one is just over 2 kilometers long." 2 kilometers? Nithara could barely speak, she was laughing so hard. "My personal yacht is longer than that." It was true. The smallest council warship was over 5 kilometers long. Their largest dreadnought stretched for more than 15 kilometers and could destroy entire moons with a single shot. "They cover these ships with metal armor," Kinos went on. "Actual metal plates, like ancient warriors, wearing crude battle suits. They mount guns that fire solid projectiles. Not energy weapons, not plasma cannons, but pieces of metal shot at high speed." "How fast?" asked someone from the back. "Very fast by their standards," Kinos said. "Perhaps 10,000 meters per second at most." The laughter died to chuckles. Even that was pathetically slow. Council weapons fired beams of pure energy at the speed of light, or launched projectiles using gravity manipulation at significant fractions of light speed. "What did our diplomatic team tell them?" asked Ambassador Kelnara, whose species had been part of the Council for over 2,000 years. "We followed standard procedure," Kenos replied. "We appeared at the edge of their system with a single diplomatic vessel. We announced our presence and requested to speak with their leaders. They responded quickly enough. And we explained the benefits of joining the Council: protection from hostile species, access to advanced technology, trade with thousands of worlds, medical advances that would double their lifespan, clean energy that would power their civilization for millions of years." "Generous terms," nodded several council members. "We also explained the consequences of refusal," Kenos continued, "that the Council maintains order in this galaxy, that species who remain outside our protection are vulnerable to conquest by others. That isolation leads to stagnation and eventual extinction." "Still generous," agreed Ambassador Kelnara. "We could simply take their world by force, but we offer them a choice." "Indeed. But these humans—" Kenos paused dramatically. "They said no." The hall erupted in shocked voices. Several council members stood up, their various forms of outrage filling the air with different colors of light, angry screeches, and other signs of displeasure. "Impossible!" shouted General Zixara. "No species refuses the Council." "These humans did," Kenos said firmly. "Their leader, someone called the Secretary General, sent a message. He thanked us for our offer but said humanity preferred to remain independent. He said they were not ready to join a galactic community and asked us to respect their decision." "The arrogance," hissed Commander Nithara. "A species that has barely learned to leave their own planet thinks they can dictate terms to the Council." "What was our response?" asked Ambassador Kelnara. "We gave them the standard ultimatum," Kenos replied. 30 of their days to reconsider. After that, we would return with a fleet to enforce compliance. We explained that their refusal put them in violation of Galactic Code 7 Alpha, which prohibits the existence of unaligned military forces in Council space. And, yesterday, their 30 days expired. This morning, we received their final answer. Kenos touched another control, and a human face appeared in the hologram. The being looked remarkably similar to several Council species, but smaller and more fragile. It had only 2 eyes, positioned close together on the front of its head. Its skin was a pale brown color, and it had dark hair on the top of its skull. "This is Admiral Kim Jun, commander of what they call the Seoul Defense Fleet," Kenos announced. He delivered their response personally. The hologram began to speak in a strange, harsh language. The translation appeared as text floating beside the image, but Kenos read it aloud for emphasis. "To the Galactic Council, we have considered your ultimatum carefully. Humanity appreciates your offer of membership, but we must decline. We are not a threat to galactic peace. We have no desire to conquer other worlds or interfere with other species. We ask only to be left alone to develop at our own pace. If you cannot respect this simple request, then we will defend ourselves as best we can. The choice is yours." Silence filled the great hall. Then slowly the silence broke into whispers, then angry muttering, then shouting. "Defend themselves?" General Zixara was so angry his rocky hide began to glow red-hot. "With what? Their metal ships and chemical rockets?" "It gets worse," Kenos said, raising his voice over the noise. "Our spy satellites detected military activity throughout their system. They appear to be preparing for war." This brought more laughter, but it was angry laughter now. "Let them prepare," snarled Commander Nithara. "We will show them why no species defies the Council and survives." "My thoughts exactly," agreed Kinos. "I recommend we assemble a demonstration fleet. Nothing too large. We don't want to completely destroy their civilization. Just enough ships to overwhelm their defenses quickly and force their surrender." "How many ships?" asked General Zixara. 200 should be more than sufficient," Kinos replied. "A mix of cruisers, destroyers, and battle cruisers. We'll keep the dreadnoughts in reserve. No point in using a sledgehammer to crush an insect." 200 ships, mused Ambassador Kelnara, "against a species with no energy shields, no faster-than-light weapons, and ships made of metal. Armor. It seems like overkill." "Better to overwhelm them completely," Kinos said. "A quick, decisive victory will make the lesson clear to any other species that might consider defying us. Besides, we can use most of the ships for intimidation. Once they see our fleet, they'll surrender without a fight." "And if they don't surrender?" asked Commander Nithara. Kinos smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Then we'll give them a demonstration of real military power. A few precision strikes on their orbital stations should convince them. If not, we can always target their moon. Seeing it cracked in half should change their minds about the wisdom of resistance." The council members voted unanimously to approve the military action. As they filed out of the Great Hall, their conversation was full of confidence and amusement. Some even made bets about how quickly the humans would surrender once they saw the Council fleet. None of them paid much attention to the final intelligence report that Kinos had skipped over, the one that mentioned strange construction activity in the asteroid belt around the human system, the one that noted unusual energy signatures from what appeared to be mining equipment, the one that recorded massive increases in military communication, traffic between Earth and its colonies. Within 6 hours, the largest fleet in galactic history began assembling at the edge of Council space. 200 warships, each more powerful than anything humanity had ever built, prepared to teach one small species the price of defying the established order. They expected to be home within a week, their mission accomplished, and their authority reinforced. They had no idea they were flying into the most devastating trap in military history. Captain Lee Hyun stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. The massive human battleship moved slowly through space, its 2.3-kilometer hull casting a shadow over the nearby asteroid. 3 days had passed since the aliens' ultimatum expired, and everyone knew what was coming. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of computers and life support systems. 47 crew members worked at their stations, their faces calm, but alert. They had trained for this moment their entire careers, but no amount of training could really prepare someone for humanity's first real war with an alien species. "Captain," called Communications Officer Han Dong from his station near the back of the bridge. "Incoming transmission on the emergency frequency. It's from Luna Station." "Put it through," Lee Hyun said, settling into his command chair. The main screen changed to show Admiral Kim Jun sitting in his office high above the lunar surface. Behind him, through a large window, Earth hung in space like a blue and white marble. The Admiral looked tired, but his voice was steady and strong. "Lee. Hyun, I'm sending you the final intelligence reports," Kim Jun said. "Our deep space monitoring stations detected the alien fleet 2 hours ago. They're still 3 days out, but the numbers are worse than we expected." "How many ships?" Lee Hyun asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad. 200. "Confirmed contacts. The smallest ones are 5 kilometers long. The largest are over 15 kilometers. Our computers estimate their total firepower at roughly 1,000 times what our entire fleet can produce. Silence filled the bridge. Everyone had known the odds were terrible, but hearing the actual numbers made it real. 1,000 times more powerful. It sounded impossible. "Sir," said Commander Park Mina, the ship's tactical officer. She was a small woman with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Are we sure about those numbers?" Admiral Kim Jun nodded grimly. "Our best scientists have been studying their technology for 30 days. They use something called antimatter weapons that can destroy entire cities with a single shot. Their shields can absorb more energy than all of Earth's power plants produce in a year. Their ships are faster, stronger, and more advanced than anything we've ever built." "Then why are we fighting?" asked Navigation Officer Choi Woo-jin from his position at the front of the bridge. He was young, maybe 25 years old, and this was his first assignment on a battleship. "Because we're human," Lee Hyun said simply, "and humans don't surrender without a fight." Kim Jun smiled at that. "Exactly. Which brings me to the real reason for this call. Operation Last Stand is now active. All ships are to follow protocol. 7 immediately." Lee Hyun felt his stomach tighten. Protocol. 7 was the plan they all hoped they would never have to use. It meant Earth's government had decided that defeat was certain, and the only choice left was to make the aliens pay as high a price as possible. "Understood, Admiral," Lee Hyun said. "The Indomitable is ready." "I know she is. You have the best crew in the fleet, Lee Hyun. If anyone can pull this off, it's you." Kim Jun paused, looking out at Earth. "Give them hell, Captain." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in heavy silence. Everyone knew what Protocol 7 meant. They were not expected to survive this battle. Their job was to hurt the enemy so badly that other alien species would think twice before attacking humanity. "All stations, report readiness," Lee Hyun said, his voice calm and professional. "Engineering reports all systems operational," called Chief Engineer Oh Jin-seo from the lower deck. He was an older man who had been building and fixing spaceships since before Lee Hyun was born. "Fusion reactors at 100%. All weapon systems online. Armor plating secure." "Navigation ready," reported Choi Woo-jin. "Course plotted and laid in. We can be at the intercept point in 18 hours. "Tactical systems fully operational," said Park Mina. "All mass drivers loaded and targeted. Nuclear missiles armed and ready. Point defense lasers online. We're as ready as we'll ever be." Lee Hyun nodded and activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. As you know, we have received confirmation that a large alien fleet is approaching our system. In approximately 72 hours, we will engage this fleet in battle." He paused, thinking about what to say next. These people had families back, on Earth, and the other colonies. Many of them had children who would grow up without parents if this mission failed. "I won't lie to you," he continued. "The enemy outnumbers us badly. Their technology is far more advanced than ours. Under normal circumstances, we would have no chance of victory." On the bridge, several crew members exchanged glances. That was not the kind of speech they expected from their captain before a battle. "But these are not normal circumstances," Lee Hyun said, his voice growing stronger. "We're not fighting for victory. We're fighting for time. Every minute we delay them is another minute for Earth to prepare its defenses. Every ship we destroy is one less ship that can threaten our families." He stood up from his chair and walked, to the center of the bridge. More importantly, we're fighting to send a message. The aliens think we're primitive and weak. They think we'll surrender the moment we see their fleet. They're about to learn that humans don't work that way. When someone threatens our home, we fight. When the odds are impossible, we fight harder. When defeat seems certain, we make sure the enemy remembers the price of victory. The bridge crew was sitting straighter now, their earlier fear replaced by determination. The Indomitable was built for one purpose: to destroy enemy ships. Every system on this vessel was designed by people who understood that we might someday face a technologically superior opponent. We don't have energy shields, so we built thicker armor. We don't have antimatter weapons, so we built bigger guns. We don't have faster-than-light communication, so we learned to think faster and hit harder. Park Mina smiled at that. She had been part of the design team that created the Indomitable's weapon systems. Every mass driver, every missile launcher, every point defense laser had been built to maximize damage against enemies exactly like the ones they were about to face. "Engineer O," Lee Hyun said, "tell me about our special modifications." Oh Jin-seo grinned. He had been waiting 30 years for someone to ask that question. "Captain, this ship is carrying hardware that officially doesn't exist. The mass drivers have been modified to fire at 20% of light speed instead of the standard 10%. We've got nuclear warheads that are 3 times more powerful than anything in the official specifications, and the reactor output has been increased by 40%. What about the other surprises?" "All deployed and ready, sir. The aliens are going to get a very unpleasant introduction to human engineering." Lee Hyun nodded and returned to his chair. "Take us to the intercept coordinates, Choi Woo-jin. Standard approach speed." "Yes, sir. Course laid in." As the Indomitable changed direction and began accelerating toward its destination, Park Mina pulled up the tactical display on her screen. The alien fleet was still 3 days away, but their approach vector was exactly what Earth's strategists had predicted. "Captain," she said quietly, "the enemy is following the most direct route to Earth. They're not trying to hide or use deception. They're coming straight at us like they own the galaxy." "That's what we're counting on," Lee Hyun replied. "Arrogance makes people predictable, and predictable enemies are easier to kill." 18 hours later, the Indomitable reached its assigned position. To anyone watching from outside, it looked like a single human battleship waiting in empty space, far from any planet or space station. The ship appeared to be alone, outnumbered, and doomed. But appearances could be deceiving. "All stations, implement Protocol 7 stealth configuration," Lee Hyun ordered. Throughout the ship, crew members began shutting down non-essential systems. The lights dimmed to emergency power only. The massive fusion reactors reduced their output to minimum levels. Life support switched to battery backup. Even the artificial gravity was reduced to save power. On the outside, the Indomitable's heat signature dropped to almost nothing. Its electromagnetic emissions fell to background levels. To any scanning equipment, it would look like a dead ship drifting in space. "Stealth configuration complete," reported Oh Jin-seo. "We're running as cold as a ship this size can run and still maintain life support." "Excellent. Park Mina, what's our status on the welcoming committee?" Park Mina smiled as she checked her instruments. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt, disguised as mining equipment and space debris, were 75 automated weapon platforms. Each one was armed with nuclear missiles and high-velocity mass drivers. Together, they represented more firepower than the rest of humanity's space fleet combined. "All platforms report ready and standing by," she said. The aliens won't see them until it's too late. Good. Now we wait. For the next 2 days, the Indomitable drifted silently through space. The crew worked in shifts, maintaining their equipment and preparing for battle. They ate cold food and spoke in whispers, even though they knew sound couldn't travel through vacuum. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. On the morning of the 3rd day, Choi Woo-jin's instruments detected the first signs of the approaching fleet. "Captain," he said, his voice tight with excitement and fear, "long-range sensors are picking up multiple contacts. They're big, sir, really big." Lee Hyun stood up and walked to the tactical display. On the screen, 200 red dots appeared, moving steadily toward Earth. Each dot represented a ship larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. "Here they come," he said quietly. "Signal all platforms to stand by. This is what we've been training for our entire lives." The final battle for humanity was about to begin. The alien fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system with a flash of brilliant light that briefly outshone the distant sun. 200 massive warships appeared in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with advanced alloys, and energy fields that bent light around their edges. Admiral Kinnos stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. The ship stretched 15 kilometers from bow to stern, its crystalline armor plating reflecting the light of nearby stars. Around him, his crew worked at stations that looked more like works of art than military equipment. "Status report," Kinnos commanded, his scaled hands folded behind his back. "All ships have successfully translated from hyperspace," reported his tactical officer, a being whose body looked like living mercury. "Formation is tight and ready for combat operations. No signs of enemy activity detected." "What about their defensive positions?" "Long-range scans show minimal activity throughout the system. We're detecting some orbital stations around their 3rd planet, but they appear to be civilian installations. No military vessels in the immediate area." Kinnossi smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "Exactly as expected. They're hiding behind their planet, hoping we'll be merciful if they don't show any aggression." He walked to the main viewing screen, which showed the inner solar system in detail. The 3rd planet from the sun appeared as a small blue dot, surrounded by the tiny specks that represented human space stations and orbital facilities. "Commander Nithara," he said into his communication device, "deploy your ships as planned. Begin scanning all human installations for military significance. Any armed stations are to be destroyed immediately." The crystalline being's voice came back through the speaker, musical and cold. "Understood, Admiral. My ships are moving to secure the outer colonies now." Nithara commanded 100 ships, half of the total fleet. Her job was to spread out through the system and capture or destroy all human military assets, while Kinnos took the remaining 100 ships directly to Earth. "What about their main fleet?" asked the tactical officer. "What fleet?" Kinnos laughed. "Our intelligence reports showed they have maybe 50 warships total, and most of those are tiny patrol vessels. They're probably hiding on the far side of their planet, hoping we won't notice them." The bridge crew joined in his laughter. The idea that 50 primitive ships could threaten 200 advanced warships was absurd. "Sir," called out the sensor operator, "I'm detecting something unusual." Kinnos walked over to the sensor station. "What is it?" "There appears to be a single ship drifting approximately 2 million kilometers from our current position. It's human design, but it's showing minimal energy output. Could be damaged or abandoned." The Admiral looked at the reading with interest. "How large?" "Approximately 2.3 kilometers in length. consistent with their largest battleship class. Battleship? Kinos was amused. Show me. The main screen changed to display a magnified view of the human vessel. It was ugly by galactic standards, built like a metal brick covered in weapon mounts and armor plating. No elegant curves or artistic designs, just brutal functionality. It looks dead in space, observed the tactical officer. Minimal heat signature, no active scanning. Engines appear to be offline. Life signs? Detecting approximately 50 biological signatures aboard. Most appear to be in some kind of hibernation or emergency sleep. Kinos studied the image thoughtfully. Interesting. Perhaps this is their flagship, damaged in some previous battle. Or maybe they're hoping to surrender when we get close enough. Should we ignore it and proceed to their homeworld? No, Kinos decided. This could be useful. If we capture their most advanced warship, we can study their technology and understand their weaknesses better. It might also convince their leaders to surrender more quickly if we hold their best ship hostage. He turned to his communications officer. Signal the fleet. I'm taking ships 1 through 100 to investigate this derelict vessel. Keep formation tight, but there's no need for battle stations. This appears to be a simple salvage operation. Within minutes, half the alien fleet was moving toward the Indomitable. The massive ships glided through space with perfect precision, their energy shields shimmering around their hulls like soap bubbles. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Lee Hyun watched the approaching aliens through a small periscope device that barely extended above the ship's armor. The main screens were dark to avoid any electromagnetic emissions that might give away their true status. They're taking the bait, he whispered to Commander Park Mina. 100 ships moving directly toward us. The other 100 are spreading, out toward the colonies. Perfect, Park Mina whispered back, just like the computer models predicted. The bridge was completely dark, except for the soft red glow of emergency lighting. The crew worked by feel and memory, their movements practiced and precise. They had drilled this exact scenario hundreds of times. Distance to lead ships? Lee Hyun asked quietly. 800,000 kilometers in closing, reported Navigation Officer Choi Woo-jin, reading from instruments that displayed no external light. Weapon status? Engineer Oh Jin Seo's voice came from the engineering deck. Below. All systems ready but powered down. Mass drivers loaded with tungsten penetrator rounds. Nuclear missiles armed and waiting. Point defense systems standing by. We can go from cold shutdown to full battle power in 12 seconds. Lee Hyun nodded, though no one could see him in the darkness. Everything depended on timing now. If they powered up too early, the aliens would detect the trap and might escape. If they waited too long, the enemy ships would be too spread out for maximum damage. Meanwhile, throughout the asteroid belt that surrounded the inner solar system, 75 automated weapon platforms waited in perfect silence. Each platform was disguised as mining equipment or space debris, invisible to casual scanning. But hidden inside their fake exteriors were weapons that represented the very best of human military engineering. Lieutenant Kim Na-ri commanded Platform 7 from a hidden bunker on the asteroid Ceres. Her screen showed the positions of all alien ships as they moved through the system. Like her colleagues on the other platforms, she had been waiting for this moment for over a year. All platforms report ready, she transmitted on a communications channel so weak it was almost indistinguishable from background radiation. Target assignments confirmed, standing by for execute order. The alien ships continued their approach, completely unaware that they were flying deeper into the most elaborate trap in human history. Admiral Kinos watched the human battleship grow larger on his screen as his fleet closed the distance. At 500,000 kilometers, he could make out individual weapon mounts and armor sections. The ship looked even more primitive up close. "Still no energy signatures," reported his sensor operator. "The vessel appears to be completely powered down except for minimal life support." "Any communications from them?" "Nothing, sir. They either can't or won't respond to our signals." Admiral Kinos leaned forward in his command chair as his flagship moved closer to the human battleship. The alien boarding shuttles were only minutes away from docking with the primitive vessel. Soon, he would have his first close look at human. "Military technology! Magnify the target," he ordered. The main screen zoomed in on the Indomitable, showing the ship's hull in incredible detail. What Kinos saw made him pause. Up close, the human vessel looked different than he had expected. The ship's surface was covered in thick armor plating, but not the crude metal sheets he had imagined. Instead, he saw layer upon layer of advanced composite materials, arranged in complex patterns that seemed designed to deflect energy weapons. Between the armor plates, he could see what looked like cooling vents and backup power systems. "Interesting," muttered his tactical officer. "Their armor design is more sophisticated than our intelligence suggested." "Still primitive," Kinos replied, but there was less certainty in his voice than before. As the magnification increased, more details became visible. The human ship bristled with weapon mounts of all sizes. Some were clearly the mass drivers their intelligence had described, but others were harder to identify. Strange, dish-shaped objects that might be sensors or communication equipment, rows of small ports that could be point defense systems. "How many weapons does this ship carry?" asked the sensor operator. "More than I expected," Kinos admitted. "But quantity means nothing without quality. Their projectile weapons can't penetrate our shields, and their primitive computers can't target our ships accurately enough to matter." On the other side of the fleet formation, Commander Nithara was having similar thoughts as she studied the readings from her science officer. Her crystalline body shifted colors from blue to yellow as she processed the information. "Commander," her science officer said, "I'm getting some unusual readings from the human vessel." "What kind of readings?" "The ship's power systems are more complex than expected. I'm detecting what appears to be multiple fusion reactors, but the energy output is much higher than standard fusion should produce." Nithara turned her attention to the tactical display. "Explain." "Based on the size of their reactors, they should be producing maybe 10% of what our antimatter systems generate. But I'm seeing signs that they might be capable of much higher output levels." "How much higher?" "If these readings are correct, maybe 30 or 40% of our power levels. Still far inferior, but not as primitive as we thought." Nithara considered this information. 40% was still pathetically weak compared to Council technology, but it was much better than the 5% they had expected from chemical rockets and crude fusion. "What about their weapons?" she asked. "That's where it gets interesting. Those mass drivers appear to be much larger than our intelligence suggested. If I'm reading these signatures correctly, they might be capable of accelerating projectiles to significant fractions of light speed." "How significant?" "Maybe 15 or 20%. "Possibly more." For the first time since arriving in the human system, Nithara felt a tiny flutter of concern. 20% of light speed was still much slower than energy weapons, but it was fast enough to be dangerous if it hit something important. "Commander," her tactical officer interrupted, "we're detecting some unusual activity in the asteroid belt." "What kind of activity?" "Energy spikes from several locations. They're very brief and very weak, but they're happening across a wide area." Nithara looked at the system-wide tactical display. Her ships were spread throughout the outer regions of the solar system, investigating human installations and mining operations. Everything seemed normal, probably just their mining equipment shutting down, she decided. These primitive species always have power fluctuations in their industrial systems. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Lee Hyun was watching the alien ships through his periscope with growing satisfaction. The enemy fleet had positioned itself exactly where he wanted them. "Distance to nearest enemy ships?" he whispered. 38,000 kilometers, Choi Woo-jin replied softly. "Their boarding shuttles will reach us in 4 minutes." "Perfect. Park Mina, are all weapon systems ready?" "All systems standing by," she confirmed. "Mass drivers loaded with armor-piercing rounds. Nuclear missiles targeted and ready to launch. Point defense systems charged and aimed." Lee Hyun nodded and activated his communication system. Throughout the ship, crew members received the signal they had been waiting for: battle stations. But this was not the usual battle stations alert with flashing lights and loud alarms. Instead, crew members moved silently to their positions, guided by soft red lights that were invisible from outside the ship. Every movement was practiced and precise. In the engineering section, Oh Jin-seo began the most important 12 seconds of his career. His hands flew over the controls as he brought the ship's massive fusion reactors from standby to full power. The first reactor came online with a deep hum that could be felt through the ship's structure. Then the second. Then the third. The Indomitable carried 5 fusion reactors, each one more powerful than anything the aliens expected from human technology, but these were not ordinary fusion reactors. Oh Jin-seo and his team had spent 3 years modifying them with techniques that officially did not exist. Instead of the standard fusion reaction that produced steady, predictable power, these reactors could be overcharged to produce massive energy spikes for short periods. "Reactor output at 120% and climbing," Oh Jin-seo reported quietly. "We can sustain this level for approximately 30 minutes before risking permanent damage." "Weapons power?" asked Park Mina. "Mass drivers charging to maximum velocity. We're looking at projectile speeds of 22% light speed. Nuclear missiles are armed with our special warheads." Lee Hyun smiled grimly. The special warheads were Oh Jin-seo's masterpiece. Each missile carried a nuclear device that was 3 times more powerful than anything in the official specifications. More importantly, they were designed to create focused explosions that would punch through energy shields instead of spreading their force over a wide area. "Captain," whispered the communications officer, receiving confirmation signals from all weapon platforms. "They're ready and waiting for your order." Throughout the asteroid belt, Lieutenant Kim Na-ri and her colleagues were making their final preparations. Platform 7 was disguised as a mining facility on a small asteroid, but hidden beneath the fake exterior were weapons that represented the best of human engineering. "Platform 7 ready," Kim Na-ri reported. "Railgun charged and targeted. Nuclear torpedo tubes loaded. Point defense systems online." The railgun was her pride and joy. It looked like mining equipment from the outside, but it was actually a massive electromagnetic accelerator capable of firing a tungsten rod at 25% of light speed. The rod weighed only 10 kilograms, but at that velocity, it carried more kinetic energy than the largest human nuclear weapon. "All platforms report ready," came the confirmation from the command center on Ceres. "Standing by for execute order." Back on the alien flagship, Admiral Kinos was getting impatient. The boarding shuttles were almost at the human ship, and he, wanted to begin the interrogation of any survivors as quickly as possible. "Status of the boarding operation?" he asked. "Shuttles will dock in 2 minutes," his tactical officer reported. "Boarding teams are prepared for standard capture protocols." "What about the ship itself? Any change in status?" "Still showing minimal power output. No signs of active weapons or defensive systems. The vessel appears to be completely helpless." Kinnos nodded with satisfaction. Soon he would have concrete proof of human military capabilities to send back to the Council. The demonstration of overwhelming force would be complete, and this primitive species would finally understand their place in the galactic order. He had no idea that deep inside the human ship, Captain Lee Hyun was counting down the final seconds before springing the most devastating trap in military history. 10 seconds to full power, Oh Jin-seo announced quietly. "All weapons locked on. Target," Park Mina confirmed. "Boarding shuttles 30 seconds from docking," Choi Woo-jin added. Lee Hyun took a deep breath and reached for the communication control that would signal the beginning of humanity's first real space battle. Around him, his crew waited in tense silence. They all knew that the next few minutes would determine whether humanity remained free or became slaves to an alien empire. The alien ships continued their confident approach, their crews relaxed and unprepared for what was about to hit them. Admiral Kinnos was still studying the human vessel, trying to understand its unusual design. Commander Naith Ara was directing her ships to capture human installations throughout the system. None of them noticed the subtle changes taking place around them. The Indomitable's reactors were now running at full power, hidden by clever heat dispersal systems that made the ship still appear dead. 75 weapon platforms throughout the asteroid belt were charged and ready, their targeting computers locked onto alien ships. 5 seconds, Oh Jin-seo announced. Lee Hyun's finger hovered over the execute button. Everything humanity had worked for, everything they had built, everything they were fighting to protect, came down to this moment. "Execute," he said quietly, and the galaxy exploded into violence. The moment Captain Lee Hyun pressed the execute button, the UES Indomitable transformed from a dead hulk into a weapon of pure destruction. Every system on the massive battleship came online simultaneously, flooding space with energy signatures that blazed like a newborn star. The ship's 5 fusion reactors roared to life, pumping power through systems that had been designed for this exact moment. Emergency lighting was replaced by the brilliant white glow of full operations. The bridge crew threw off their stealth gear and rushed to their battle stations with practiced efficiency. "All systems online!" shouted Engineer Oh Jin-seo from his position below the main deck. "Reactors at 130% power, all weapons charged and ready." On the main tactical display, 100 red dots representing alien ships suddenly found themselves surrounded by targeting symbols. The Indomitable's computers had been passively tracking every enemy vessel for hours, calculating firing solutions and optimal attack patterns. "Firing!" Commander Park Mina announced. The ship's primary mass drivers opened fire first. These were not the crude projectile weapons the aliens expected, but precision instruments of war that had been refined through decades of human conflict. 8 massive railguns fired tungsten rods at 22% of light speed, each projectile carrying the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon. The tungsten rods crossed the space between the Indomitable and the nearest alien ships in less than 2 seconds. The aliens' energy shields, designed to stop directed energy weapons and slower projectiles, were not prepared for solid objects moving at such incredible speeds. The first rod struck the alien cruiser Harmony of Spheres directly amidships. The ship's shields flared briefly, then collapsed completely as the tungsten penetrator punched through them like they were made of paper. The rod continued through the ship's hull, smashing through armor plating, internal bulkheads, and vital systems before exiting the other side in a shower of debris. The alien ship began to break apart immediately. Its beautiful, crystalline hull cracked like an eggshell, venting atmosphere and plasma into space. Emergency lights flickered along its length as power systems failed and internal explosions tore through the vessel. But the mass drivers were only the beginning. "Nuclear missiles away!" Park Mina called out. 60 missiles launched from hidden tubes along the Indomitable's hull. These were not the standard nuclear weapons in humanity's arsenal, but special devices that O Jinseo had designed specifically to defeat energy shields. Instead of creating large, unfocused explosions, they generated narrow beams of nuclear fire that could penetrate defensive barriers. The missiles streaked toward their targets at incredible speed, their engines burning so hot they looked like tiny suns racing through the darkness. Each one was guided by sophisticated computers that could adjust their course to hit moving targets with pinpoint accuracy. Admiral Kinos watched in horror from the bridge of his flagship as the human weapons struck his fleet. The first alien ships to die were the ones closest to the Indomitable, but the destruction was spreading rapidly through his formation. "Impossible!" he screamed at his tactical officer. "Their weapons can't penetrate our shields." "Sir, the projectiles are moving too fast," the officer replied, his mercury-like body trembling with fear. "Our shields can't react quickly enough to stop solid objects at those velocities." On the main screen, another alien ship exploded as a nuclear missile detonated directly against its hull. The focused nuclear explosion burned through the ship's armor like acid, creating a hole that vented the vessel's atmosphere in a brilliant plume of gas and debris. "Return fire," Kinos ordered. "All ships, target the human vessel immediately." But his ships were not ready for battle. They had approached the Indomitable expecting to capture a helpless prize, not fight a desperate enemy. Their weapons were powered but not actively targeted, their crews relaxed and unprepared for sudden combat. The alien ships began to turn toward the human battleship, their massive energy weapons charging with deadly intent. But they were moving too slowly, and the Indomitable was not finished with its attack. "Point defense systems, engage!" Li Hyun commanded. Along the human ship's hull, hundreds of small laser cannons opened fire. These weapons had been designed to shoot down incoming missiles and fighter craft, but the aliens had brought their ships close enough that the lasers could target vital systems directly. Beams of coherent light flashed across space, striking alien vessels at sensor arrays, weapon mounts, and engine systems. The lasers were not powerful enough to destroy the massive ships, but they could blind their sensors and damage their ability to fight back effectively. Meanwhile, throughout the asteroid belt, Lieutenant Kim Nari and her fellow platform commanders were adding their own contribution to the battle. "Platform 7 firing," Kim Nari announced, her railgun discharged with a flash of electromagnetic energy that lit up the asteroid like a lightning strike. The tungsten rod it fired was even faster than the Indomitable's projectiles, moving at 25% of light speed as it streaked toward its target. The rod struck an alien destroyer that was trying to maneuver away from the battle. The ship's rear shields collapsed instantly, and the projectile punched through the vessel's engine section. The destroyer's fusion reactors overloaded and exploded, tearing the ship apart from the inside. All across the asteroid belt, hidden weapon. Platforms were revealing themselves and opening fire. What the aliens had dismissed as mining equipment was actually a network of automated defense systems that had been waiting for exactly this moment. "Nuclear torpedoes away!" called out the commander of Platform 12. "Railgun firing," reported. "Platform 23, missile salvo launched," announced Platform 41. The space around the alien fleet erupted in a storm of human weapons. Tungsten rods, nuclear missiles, plasma torpedoes, and laser beams converged on the enemy ships. From dozens of different directions, the aliens found themselves caught in a crossfire that they had never imagined possible. Commander Nith-Ara, commanding the other half of the alien fleet near the outer planets, watched the battle through her communication systems with growing panic. Half of Admiral Kinos's ships were already destroyed or severely damaged, and the attack had been going on for less than 5 minutes. "All ships return to support the Admiral immediately," she ordered. But her ships were scattered across millions of kilometers of space, investigating human installations that had turned out to be empty or booby-trapped. It would take them precious minutes to regroup and travel back to the battle, and she was beginning to realize that might be too late. "Commander," her tactical officer said urgently, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the asteroid belt. The humans have weapon platforms hidden everywhere." Nithara looked at her tactical display with growing horror. The asteroids that her scientists had dismissed as simple mining operations were lighting up like Christmas decorations as hidden weapons revealed themselves. "How many platforms?" she asked. "At least 70, possibly more. They're targeting our ships as we speak." Even as her officer spoke, the first railgun projectiles from the outer defense platforms began reaching her scattered vessels. The alien ship Eternal Song took a tungsten rod through its command section, killing the bridge crew instantly and leaving the vessel spinning helplessly through space. Back at the main battle, Admiral Kinos was trying desperately to organize some kind of response to the human attack. His flagship was one of the few alien vessels that had managed to return fire, its massive antimatter cannons sending beams of pure energy toward the Indomitable. But the human ship was ready for energy. Weapons. Its hull was covered with reflective armor designed to scatter laser and plasma attacks. The alien beams struck the battleship's armor and dissipated harmlessly, unable to penetrate the multiple layers of defensive plating. "Our weapons are ineffective," his tactical officer reported. "The human ship's armor is designed specifically to defeat energy weapons." "Then get us closer!" Kinos snarled. "We'll ram them if we have to." But getting closer to the Indomitable was easier said than done. The human ship was moving now, its massive engines pushing it through space at speeds that seemed impossible. For something so large, Captain Lee Hyun was using his ship's superior maneuverability to stay ahead of the alien vessels while continuing to pour fire into their formation. "Target the largest ship," Lee Hyun ordered, pointing toward Kinos's flagship. "All weapons, concentrate fire!" The Indomitable's guns swiveled toward the Eternal Dominion, the alien flagship that stretched 15 kilometers from end to end. It was a beautiful vessel, designed as much for intimidation as for warfare, with graceful curves and decorative armor that made it look more like a work of art than a military ship. But beauty was no defense against human weapons. 8 tungsten rods struck the flagship simultaneously, punching through its shields and armor like bullets through paper. The massive ship shuddered under the impact, its hull cracking along stress, lines that had never been tested in real combat. Nuclear missiles followed seconds later. their focused explosions burning through the ship's superstructure and setting off secondary explosions throughout its length. The Eternal Dominion began to list to one side as its internal gravity systems failed. Admiral Kinos felt his ship dying around him. Emergency alarms wailed throughout the bridge as system after system went offline. The main screen flickered and went dark, leaving him unable to see the battle that was destroying his fleet. "Damage report!" he screamed. "All primary weapons offline," his tactical officer replied. "Hull breaches on 37 decks. Engine output down to 20%. Sir, we need to abandon ship." For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kinos faced the possibility of defeat. Not just defeat, but complete annihilation at the hands of a species he had dismissed as primitive and helpless. Around him, the greatest fleet in galactic history was being torn apart by weapons that should not have been able to threaten advanced alien technology. In less than 10 minutes, 200 ships had been reduced to 50, and the destruction was continuing at an ever-increasing pace. The humans had not just rejected the Galactic Council's ultimatum, they had turned the Council's own arrogance into a weapon that was destroying everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. The battle that had seemed impossible was ending in complete human victory. In just 15 minutes, the most powerful fleet in galactic history had been reduced to scattered wreckage and a handful of damaged ships trying desperately to escape. Captain Li Hyun stood on the bridge of the Indomitable watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Where 200 red enemy contacts had appeared less than an hour ago, only 12 remained. Most of those were damaged beyond repair and drifting helplessly through space. "Cease fire on disabled vessels," he ordered. "Focus on any ships trying to escape." Commander Park Mina adjusted her targeting systems to track the few alien ships that still had working engines. "Sir, 3 vessels are attempting to retreat toward the edge of the system. Should we pursue?" "Let the outer platforms handle them," Li Hyun replied. "Our job here is finished." Throughout the asteroid belt, the hidden weapon platforms that had remained silent during the main battle now opened fire on the fleeing aliens. Lieutenant Kim Na-ri watched through her sensors as Platform 15 launched a spread of nuclear. Torpedoes at a damaged cruiser trying to reach hyperspace. The alien ship never had a chance. The torpedoes struck its engines just as it was building up energy for the jump to faster-than-light travel. The explosion was visible from millions of kilometers away, a brief new star that marked the end of another Council vessel. Platform 7 reporting enemy destroyer eliminated, Kim Na-ri announced on the communication channel. No survivors detected. Similar reports came in from platforms throughout the system. The few aliens who had survived the initial ambush were being hunted down with ruthless efficiency. Humanity had learned long ago that leaving enemies alive to report back was a dangerous mistake. Admiral Kinos floated in the wreckage of his flagship's bridge, held in place by his emergency harness. Around him, the command center that had once been the pride of the Velthari Empire was a scene of destruction. Smoke filled the air. Emergency lights flickered weakly, and the bodies of his crew drifted in the zero gravity created by the ship's failed systems. "Sir," came a weak voice from somewhere in the darkness. "Sir, are you alive?" Kinos turned his head painfully to see his communications officer trapped under a fallen beam. The being's mercury-like body was leaking silver fluid from several wounds. "I'm here," Kinos replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "The humans are broadcasting on all frequencies. the officer gasped. I think they want to talk. With great effort, Kinos activated his personal communication device. The small screen flickered to life, showing the face of the human who had just destroyed everything he had believed about military superiority. Captain Lee Hyun looked directly into the camera, his expression calm, but his eyes hard as steel. Behind him, the bridge of the Indomitable hummed with efficient activity as his crew continued their work. This is Captain Lee Hyun of the United Earth ship Indomitable, broadcasting to all surviving vessels of the so-called Galactic Council Fleet, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the emergency systems of the dying alien ships. 15. Minutes ago, you came to our system with 200 warships demanding our surrender. You believed that your superior technology and numbers would force us to submit to your authority. You were wrong. On the screen, Lee Hyun gestured toward his tactical display, which showed the positions of the destroyed alien vessels. Your fleet has been annihilated. Of your 200 ships, fewer than 10 remain intact, and those are too damaged to pose any threat. This was not luck, and it was not an accident. This was the result of careful planning, superior tactics, and the determination of a species that refuses to kneel to anyone. Admiral Kinos listened to the human's words with growing horror. This had not been a desperate last stand by a primitive species. It had been a calculated execution carried out by beings who understood warfare better than the Council had ever imagined. You made several mistakes, Lee Hyun continued. First, you assumed that advanced technology automatically means military superiority. Second, you believed that our lack of energy shields and antimatter weapons made us helpless. Third, you thought that superior numbers would guarantee victory. The human captain's expression grew harder. But your greatest mistake was assuming that we would be afraid of you. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We have faced enemies with better weapons, larger armies, and superior positions. We have learned that victory does not always go to the strongest or the most advanced. Victory goes to those who are willing to do whatever it takes to protect what they love. In the medical bay of the Indomitable, Dr. Han Sol was treating the B survivors pulled from alien escape pods. Her patients were a mix of different species, all sharing the same expression of shock and disbelief. They had witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. How? Whispered one of the survivors, a crystalline being that Dr. Han Sol recognized as Commander Nithara. How did you defeat our shields? Our technology is thousands of years more advanced than yours. Dr. Han Sol looked up from the medical scanner she was using to assess the aliens' injuries. Technology isn't everything, she said quietly. You built your ships to be impressive and beautiful. We built ours to kill our enemies. But our shields should have stopped your weapons. Your shields were designed to stop energy weapons and slow projectiles, Dr. Han Sol explained patiently. Our weapons fire solid objects at 25% of light speed. Physics doesn't care how advanced your technology is. Kinetic energy is kinetic energy. She returned to her work, monitoring the aliens' vital signs. You also made the mistake of getting too close. Your weapons are designed for long-range combat, where you can use your superior firepower safely. We brought you in close, where our weapons work best and yours work poorly. Commander Nithara was quiet for a long moment. Your species. You planned this entire battle, didn't you? The disabled ship, the hidden weapons platforms, everything. We've been planning for this day since we first learned about the Galactic Council, Dr. Han Sol admitted. We knew that eventually someone would come to our system demanding submission. We decided long ago that we would rather die fighting than live as slaves. Meanwhile, Captain Lee Hyun was finishing his broadcast to the galaxy. The survivors of "Your fleet will be treated according to the rules of war," he said. "Your wounded will receive medical care, and your escape pods will be rescued. We are not monsters, despite what your leaders may have told you about humanity." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "But let this be a warning to anyone else who thinks they can intimidate the human race. We offered you peace, but you chose war. We asked only to be left alone, but you demanded our submission. The choice was yours, and you chose poorly." The transmission switched to show images from throughout the Sol system. Human rescue ships were already moving among the wreckage, searching for survivors and escape pods. Medical teams were preparing to treat alien wounded. It was a scene of organized efficiency that spoke of careful preparation and professional military conduct. "This system is under human protection," Lee Hyun announced. "Any ship approaching with hostile intent will be destroyed without warning. We have no desire for conquest, but we will defend our home with absolute determination." The camera returned to Lee Hyun's face. "The age of galactic intimidation is over. Humanity will not be threatened, conquered, or enslaved. We are prepared to coexist peacefully with any species that respects our independence. But to those who would threaten us, understand this. We are not the primitive species you thought we were. We are humanity, and we do not surrender." The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to process what had just happened. On the crystal world of Vexatara, the remaining members of the Galactic Council watched the recordings from their destroyed fleet in stunned silence. For 3,000 years, they had maintained order through superior technology and overwhelming force. No species had ever successfully resisted their authority, until now. "How many ships do we have left?" asked one of the council members, his voice barely audible. 17 vessels managed to escape to hyperspace," came the reply. "All are damaged. All report heavy casualties." "Out of 200. Ships?" "Yes." The silence stretched on as the implications sank in. The largest military force in galactic history had been destroyed by a species that the Council had dismissed as barely worthy of notice. "What do we do now?" someone asked. No one had an answer. Back in the Sol system, Captain Lee Hyun was receiving reports from throughout the human fleet. The battle was over, but the work was just beginning. Rescue operations, prisoner processing, intelligence gathering, and damage assessment would take days to complete. "Sir," Communications Officer Han Dong reported, "we're receiving transmissions from human colonies throughout the galaxy. Word of the battle is spreading fast." "What kind of transmissions?" "Congratulations, mostly, and requests for protection. It seems that news of our victory is inspiring other species to consider resisting Council authority." Lee Hyun nodded thoughtfully. The battle in the Sol system had been about more than just human independence. It had shown the entire galaxy that the Galactic Council could be defeated. "Send replies to all human colonies," he ordered. "Tell them that Earth stands ready to defend any human settlement that requests our protection, and let the other species know that humanity is willing to share our defensive technology with anyone who wants to remain free." As the Indomitable moved through the debris field that had once been the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, Captain Lee Hyun reflected on what had just happened. Humanity had not sought this war, but they had been prepared for it. They had turned their enemy's arrogance into a weapon and used it to achieve the impossible. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of council supremacy was over, and the age of human space had begun.